You're mayor again?
I guess so.
First, press.
I went to see it.
He's one of those guys, we know a million people, but we never met him. What's more lovely?
No matter where we sign it,
No.
but again, I'll let him.
Tom, how are you?
Bruce, I swear to God, on my parents' grave about what I'm about to tell you. 5 seconds ago, I'm saying I wanted to...
Hi Tom, this is Andrew calling from Tom's phone. I'm with the Coastal Coalition. I have the live stream up currently so that you guys can see the meeting without coming down here. Go ahead and give Tom a call back as soon as you're ready, and I'll go ahead and provide you instructions on how to get access to the stream. Alright, thank you, bye-bye.
Because you don't have the next minute. I've been in school where they still tell us they're going to give us their slides, but they're taking pictures of the slides, writing down, like, oh, we'll give it to you after
Congratulations. Talk to you.
Hi, this is Andrew Dietz calling from Tom's phone. I'm with the Coastal Coalition. Good. I have the stream up currently, and I can guide you on how to get access to it. Do you have text messages available? Do you have text messages available on your So I just need to send you a link. That's all you need to do. So, do you have text message available? Sure. Let me get it out real quick. Hold on 1 second. But then I will shoot you an email with the link to it, and you guys watch it from there.
You and Francis tell me everything.
No problem. It's a little bit of a beta test.
Whatever you guys tell me.
Less than you like.
This is just for the work time. Right.
How's Steve doing?
I'll have the link there in a minute. If you don't get it, go ahead and just give Tom a call back. I'll have his phone here, okay? Alright, no problem. Bye-bye.
Is everybody signed in? Take that as a yes. Like this, I'm going to start in a couple minutes. Speak for a few minutes. Did you get your handouts, or you want to do that when you do your presentation?
We thought we gave it out on here.
You can do whatever you want. What I'd like to do is, I'm going to speak for a few minutes. I'm going to do the roll call, a couple of things. Then I'd like to introduce you. 20, 25 minutes, do you think, for your presentation? Yeah, no, that's good. And then maybe 10 minutes for questions. And then I'm going to announce that you'll be available after the meeting to answer any questions. My name's Tom. Art, you want to sign in? Sure. Nah, sit up there. You're just running behind all morning, and I got a million things I'm trying to do. I ordered dough. I couldn't get good dough. I'm making pizza tonight. I couldn't get good dough, so I had to order Amicus. So instead, I couldn't get quality product. So I had to go with a lesser.
He's ignoring it.
Sounds like a little trash
A little trash talk.
Listen, he's a born entertainer. 50 years ago, his uncle was Tony Grant Stars of Tomorrow, and he's still here.
In 1957,
Connie Francis.
1957, Frank Sinatra's Steel Pier, and he's they're paisanos. So he's in there, and they're both crazy about clothes. My uncle used to spend 10, 15 grand on clothes a year back when that was a.
In the 50s.
They were dressed up.
Yeah. So he's in there with Sinatra, right? And he goes, and they're both about the same age. And he says, "I love your tie." And he told me, he says, "That was a terrible mistake." And I said, "Well, I was mistaken." And he says, "Because he took it off. $200 so top." And he gave it to me. I said, "No, you can't." And Sinatra made it was like a blood thing, and he didn't take it. And he showed it to me, this is back in the 60s. He showed it to me.
That's a big frame. Maybe wear it once and then frame it.
My uncle knew there was a lot of celebrities, so Sinatra considered him a peer. They weren't, but he considered him a peer. My uncle was a tremendous dancer back in the 30s. Went out to Hollywood, all the stars of Fred Astaire, all the stars. And then he came back here and he started, he helped Connie Francis, and he helped a lot of the guys that came out of in the late 50s that were coming out of Philadelphia. My uncle was involved with Frank Gallagher and those guys. So, everybody pretty much signed in, ready to go. Alright, now here's the story. I'm going to speak for a few minutes, so if you have to sleep or anything, just don't bother that you're going to doze off or anything like that. Don't get worried about that. So, does anybody need an agenda? Didn't bring an agenda? Frank? Young man.
Hi.
Benny. Naughty, naughty.
You did. I have it printed on my desk, actually.
Good spot. At least now we know where it is.
It's like my coat's in the car.
Good spot. Anybody else need an agenda? Sorry.
You guys are
Need an agenda? Young man? I'll do. Frank?
I did break down the budget.
Andrew, you have an agenda?
Take one.
Mike, you have one?
These should be in.
All right, I'm out of agendas.
All right. Tom, he's watching.
Okay, good. All right, we'll get started. My name's Tom Quirk. I have the honor of being the executive director of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. I have the privilege of speaking before you today. We have the agenda. As usual, Francis Brown, our secretary, voluntary secretary, has done a magnificent job in setting the agenda up. And as usual, I am going to take everything out of order. So the first thing I'm going to do is say that I'm the luckiest guy in the room because I know almost everybody here, but everybody here doesn't necessarily know each other. So what I'd like to do is have us introduce ourselves so that we get a chance to meet one another and exchange the information that's so important to the coalition, and that's why we're here to exchange information. So I'll start with this young man over here and just announce your name and your affiliation, and then we'll go to Jimmy and then through back and forth and down, and then we'll get all introduced.
Frank Farica, here with Salmon Ventures for today's proposal and Triad Associates. Other than that, I'm a bread baker.
I love your bread.
Galantino, Margate City,
That's still right.
and Linwood.
Pat Mencione, construction official, zoning official, and CFM for Egg Harbor Township.
Mike Kuchenberg, Stone Harbor Construction Official.
Neil Byrne, Sioux Isle City, Nation City construction official.
Defunct Longport, Sony, CRS, and OEM.
Who's next?
Gary Miller, Cape May Point.
Nita Van Heeswick, Deputy Mayor, Borough of Cape May Point.
Connie Mann, Business Administrator, Wild Crest.
Mark de Blasio, Engineer for Stone Harbor, Wild Crest.
Dave McKeon, Coalition Advisor.
Patricia Gray Hendricks, Deputy Mayor of the City of Cape May.
Representing Berkeley Township, Remington Engineer.
Chrissy Tracy for Thomas Heist Insurance Agency.
Vanessa Warnish, DEP Coastal Engineering. Montina Afrin, Constituent Services for Assemblyman Mass River Model.
Leanne Napoli, the City of Linwood.
Melissa Bonner, Hayden, Shore Grants.
JT White, Bar Hunter.
Samantha Forum.
Dan Tafoya, Ocean City Engineering.
Arthur Chu, Engineer.
Frank Bruton, Lock McDonald, CRS coordinator for the boroughs of Manteloking and the borough of Avalon.
Don Voice, South Jersey Gas.
Mike Pamulara, Atlantic City Fire Department, also Deputy OEM Coordinator.
Steve Rankin, Brown Insurance.
Jeannie Schmidt, Brown Insurance.
Kim Stevenson, Borough of Stone Harbor. Francis Brown, Atlantic County.
Joel Dome, Army Corps of Engineers.
Paul Dietrich, Upper Township.
And this is Mike.
Mike Zampino, CEO of Triad Associates.
Tammy Wetzel from Triad Associates.
Morgan Pyle from Sound Adventures.
Andrew?
Andrew Gates, Coastal Coalition.
Okay, so that's everybody. Some unfinished business from December. What I had said at our December meeting, we had a very nice turnout for those that couldn't make it, and we're beginning our 8th year, and we started from a group of very frightened officials in the aftermath of Sandy in January of 2013. We're beginning our 8th year of operation. And the reason we're here is because a lot of dedicated people got together and volunteered their time to make our organization what it is today. Today we have 30 municipal participants ranging in 6 different counties, from Cumberland, Cape May, Atlantic, Ocean, Monmouth, and Middlesex. And what I'd like to do is I wanted to thank some of the people that got us to where we are. And one of the founders of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and it was his idea, along with some other fellows, was Bruce Funk from Longport. And I wanted to thank Bruce by a donation from the Thomas Heist.
Free flood insurance for the rest of my life?
His book, Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, with a nice bag for Bruce.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Another person that couldn't make the meeting in December has been a tremendous resource for us for the last few years. His insight and his contributions can't be measured. And I just wanted to thank him in the same way with the same book and donation from the Thomas Heist Association, and that's our policy advisor, David McKeon.
Thanks, Tom.
Dave, thanks very much. Finally, as a door prize for someone that's been with us from just about the very beginning and has been there for almost every meeting and has been a very valuable resource in making us what we are today, and that's Mike Kuchenberg from Stone Harbor.
Yeah, Michael.
Mike's been with us from the beginning, and you know, the value of the coalition is the exchange of ideas. Almost at every meeting, someone comes in, geez, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do that. Someone else says, well, I do, and that's what we do. We work together. We're a 501c3, and we take charitable donations. I have some good news that I'm going to announce in a second, and then we're going to do some other things. So the next thing I'd like to do is just shout out your name when I read your name, so that Francis can get down who's here. Mike, are you from Atlantic City? Your name again?
Mike Famularo.
Mike Famularo from Atlantic City. Avalon is Frank Bruton. Someone here from Barnegat? No. Beach Haven? Berkeley? Yeah, Leanne D'Amico. Brigantine? No. Cape May City, that's Patricia. Cape May Point, Anita. Down Township. Egg Harbor Township, Pat Naccione. Linwood, Leanne. Longport, Bruce. Margate, Jimmy. Neptune, anybody here from Neptune? North Wildwood. Anyone here from North Wildwood? Ocean City, Benny Tafoya. Pleasantville, that's a no. Seattle City, Neal. Seaside Park, no. Summers Point. Stafford, that's a no. Stone, Tim Stevenson. Upper Township, Fall. Dietrich, Ventnor, anyone here from Ventnor? Waretown. West Wildwood. Carlson, not here. Wildwood Crest.
Cunningham.
Okay. Woodbridge. Now, this is interesting. We're televising this as a chance to see if we can make this happen. And Andrew Gates is our intern, and he's forgotten more about this stuff than I'll ever learn. So we're testing to see if we can televise these things to just ourselves. This won't be open to the public. But you know the story. Tom Flynn is on right now watching us. He's up in Woodbridge. So that's about an hour and a half. Trust me, I know that.
Please see me with questions after the meeting. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes. And so if we can make this thing happen, I mean, I see we have some people that are up in Trenton and some other things. It's a trek. So you can't make every meeting. We have Patricia's in Cape May, and if we're up in having a meeting in Ocean County, that's an hour and a half with Patricia and Neil and Cooch and Kin. So we're going to start televising these things if we can, so that if you can't attend, you'll be able to hook into our feed and watch it. So that's what we're hoping for. Next, Atlantic County Government. Francis is here. Ocean County Government. Anyone here from Ocean County? Monmouth County Government, Joe Barris couldn't make it. So, the next thing I'd like to announce is we've been very fortunate. In the last month, we received 3 different grants from 3 different entities through Shore Grants, and that's Melissa Vonderhagen, and I'm very excited. I'll be speaking to the communities that we're going to be working with. We got these grants. They're small, but you got to get started someplace. So I wanted to publicly thank Melissa Vonderhagen and Shore Grants, 3 grants in less than a month, so I'm very excited about that. I think there's many more to come. So there's that. And now what I'd like to do, introduce everybody. Does anybody have any questions at this time, or we'll begin the presentation? We're going to have a presentation from Michael Zampino from Triad Associates. Michael.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone, and just a word of thanks to the coalition for inviting us to speak and to hopefully shed some light on grant funding for flood mitigation and resiliency and an approach to focusing on the issues that affect every one of us here. So as not to break from the part too far from the agenda, you heard us all with introductions. Salmon Ventures, Frank and Morgan are here. Tammy Wetzel from my office at Triad. And, I think we are working with some of you on mitigation projects right now. And I think Tom felt it would be helpful if we could share our experiences with you and some approaches that we have found to be very effective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Morgan Pyle, to initiate the presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting us join you today. As Mike said, my name is Morgan Pyle, and I'm representing Salmon Ventures today, along with Frank. And we have Michael and Tammy from Triad. So we have 2 companies here today, but we're 2 companies that form one team. So we have been working together for 25, 30 years, Salmon Ventures and Triad Associates. So we bring a different approach to planning for and implementing coastal resiliency strategies as a team. So there will be copies of the presentation that you can take with you at the end, and also we will be sending it out via email. In keeping with the mission of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition to build more resilient communities of the Jersey Shore by developing policies and practices, that's what we want to do for you. We want to apply the experience and the successes that our two companies, one team, have had over the past years to help you go about the process of how to mitigate and how to be resilient. And we also are here to explain to you and help you find resources that are needed for successes. So many of you know that there are differences between mitigation projects and resiliency projects, and we are here to help you with both. The mitigation projects are reactive, and the resilient projects are proactive. Salmon Ventures and Triad Associates have over 75 years of combined public service experience. And that's something that we bring to the table as a team together. We also have almost $1 billion in funding secured. We have ongoing working relationships with local, state, county, federal government officials, appointees, and we are able to use those relationships to better help your communities and your towns. We also provide ongoing coordination and technical support. So you will have access to a member of Salmon Ventures or a member of Triad as a team every day. We provide the ability to talk to our leaders via their cell phone numbers and their office numbers. Those are all in these documentations that you'll be getting as well. The specialization that comes from our team is in flood mitigation and resiliency program projects. We are able to work with the leaders that we talked about earlier, with the contacts from over 75 years of experience and working for these communities to help you get what you need. The reason we're here today is because it's extremely important to plan for future storm events. We have broken it down into 5 reasons why communities must prepare and strategize for these events. As all of us in this room know, we've been faced with ever-growing challenges from these storms. And for example, in Superstorm Sandy, it was the 4th costliest mainland storm to the United States, and it damaged or destroyed 346,000 housing units. So these 5 reasons why our communities must prepare for these storms and strategize. 1, to lessen their impact. 2, to protect critical resources, which include public facilities, services, and infrastructure. 3, to reduce the potential for injury or loss of life. 4, to lessen property damage and costs. And 5, to shorten the time of recovery. That's an introduction to what we can provide as a team with Triad and Salmon Ventures. Tammy will be discussing next the approach that Triad and Salmon Ventures takes in order to help you with these projects.
Good morning.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, he's on by here. So some of the communities that are in here we've already been working with, and in all honesty, some of that working and those traits that have been going on for the last 15 years of my tenure at Triad have had us learn this, because inevitably this is a phone call. Irene happened, Sandy happened, we're going to apply for HMGP money. Okay, what do we need for the benefit cost analysis? Have you rented pumps? Sure. Do you have receipts? How many of us have been in that situation where we get ready, a disaster has happened, and we haven't gone through this 5-step process? Now all of a sudden, we have 30 to 45 days to apply for something, and we're scrambling around trying to get resources, trying to identify where we're going. Let's be proactive. That's what this whole organization was put together for, so that we can begin planning now and looking outside of the box. Pre-Irene, there was a litany, there was a list, there was everything you could possibly imagine about how to get money. And it was in one place, it was FEMA. And pretty much if you needed money to do anything on the resilience or to react on a mitigation project, you looked to FEMA, it was a one-stop shop you could apply. That's not the case anymore. As you all know, I'm not telling you professionals, you're all the professionals in this area. You know that that list has gotten shorter and shorter, and the funds have gotten less and less over the years. Now the only way that we can react and get our share of the pie here in New Jersey as a coastal community especially, and I look to the communities in Cumberland. Cumberland didn't get Sandy money. If you think back, Cumberland County got hit equally as hard Downtownship, some of those others, they weren't one of the 9 that got identified. Therefore, every dollar that was fought for in Cumberland County had to be done through another avenue than just your traditional, let's go public worksheet and see what resources are out there and available. And that's what kind of made us look at how can we approach this from a 5-step plan that now on a nice sunny day as a group that's calm and not facing disaster, not looking at a flooded basement in our own private home, how do we begin to plan for that next disaster? And that's what we want to do today. We want to kind of think together on this and how have we been thinking? And honestly, we've taken some of the solutions from all of our clients and we're bringing them here because some of you are here. But if we collectively share as a region, it's going to be a little bit better. So that's kind of how we want to approach this. First thing, we want to think about a 5-step approach. Available resources. What's out there in reports and baseline data? And we're going to talk about that. How to identify what sorts of areas of risk, resources, and assessments. And that's not money. That is facilities and programming in your communities now. What do I need to look at when I'm thinking about a Green Acres grant? What does Green Acres have to do with anything when it comes to resiliency and mitigation? It has to do with how you design it. Impervious surfaces, where you put parking lots, what becomes green space. Because if you start building things, what does that mean? You have runoff going in other areas, and that runoff becomes a mitigation issue down the pipe. So we need to look at that. You want to develop resiliency strategies. You have everything from your public works to your police, your fire, your BAs, all speaking together, again, today on a nice sunny day. What are some of the grants out there? And then most important, how do you engage a team of professionals to look at that? And that's inclusive. So when we think about establishing baseline conditions, are we thinking about what we need? And I know there's a couple BAs in here that we've worked with, and you've gotten that phone call from us, or we've gotten a phone call from you. Hey, Triad, we want to go after this pre-disaster mitigation grant. Wonderful. Let's get started. And then when we give the list of things that are required for the benefit cost analysis, it becomes a scramble. And it's because data is in your public works department. Some of it is in your financial department. Your police has it. Your OEM guy has your public worksheets. How about we start identifying and collecting this available data now? Making sure that we have an organized Dropbox. Maybe we have one identified person that becomes someone within somebody's office that can start looking at how I'm going to survey residents. What are their needs? How many of my residents aren't putting flood claims in, and now therefore they're maybe not showing up on the severe repetitive loss charts? They're saying, you know what, it was a few inches, I vacuumed up with my wet dry vac, I didn't put any claim in. But how do we collect that? You can. FEMA allows you to still get their information. You just need to advise your residents to save receipts. Jot down those days that you didn't put a flood claim in, but that you were using your wet vac to clean up. What time was involved? Did you have to put new waterproofing paint down? How much did that cost? These conversations are things that any of you can have with your residents to start collecting this baseline data and these conditions so that come the time that you want to come up with a plan or go after a grant, you have that information available. In looking at that, emergency services personnel, what do they need and what have they been using? Overtime costs, rented equipment. Those are items that can be claimed in your benefit cost analysis, but are you claiming it? So often we make the phone call, yeah, my guys worked overtime, but it wasn't set aside in its own line item in a database somewhere to say, these 65 hours were all attributed to detours, traffic circulation movement after a major storm, and therefore that money can be attributed to your baseline data when you're going after grant money for resiliency and mitigation dollars. All of these are some conversations that we would like to start having with folks, or at least having you start having in your own individual communities. Collect data, know what's out there, have centralized resources, create baseline. It'll help you as we go into the next step. The next step that we've identified is identifying risk resources and assets in your community. We've given you a list, and Morgan already noted that we're going to give you a handout on this. Are you asking yourself these questions? How does everything on that list impact a potential resiliency solution or a mitigation issue? So every time your engineer is coming in and saying, hey, we're going after a transportation enhancement grant or a TAC grant, or we're going to do a new municipal aid application, how does that particular transportation project and how it impacts the network of circulation also impact mitigation and resiliency?
Everything okay?
Yep.
What is ingress egress when you're doing some of these transportation networks? Your water supply. Does it have emergency generators? Are they elevated above base elevation at this time? If they aren't, what is the plan to get them elevated? Do they have the right capacity? When we look at housing, what are our vulnerable populations? We have a community that ironically keeps getting hit by not unnamed storms. It's in Salem County, but unfortunately, they built their housing authority properties at the lowest elevation in the community. Probably 75 years ago, 73 years ago, to be exact, when it was built, it wasn't a big thing. But now, in the last 5 years, they've had 9 unnamed storms that have brought anywhere between 7.5 inches of flood all the way up to about 3.5 feet of flood. And unfortunately, they're in a community where it's not impacted by, or it is not being given resources because of unnamed, unknown storms. There are nor'easters that come in off the river, and they're flooding into the community. What we are now asking them to do is thinking about, as they are rebuilding units, are they elevating them at minimal? Are they doing flood proofing of low elevation parts of the properties? These costs are being included into just general plans, just general maintenance and capital improvements. Where before they would go in and paint. Now they're going in and painting with waterproof paint in the lower elevations. All because they have a mind of looking forward as to how do I think about every project, every resource, every infrastructure that's going on in my community with an eye towards resiliency and or what's going to be a mitigation solution prior to that next storm that we know is going to come. Health and Human Services, community resources. So you think, well, how does that fit into resiliency or mitigation? Well, the more prepared they are to be responsive, the more that they can put into their own grants. They're writing grants all the time, and they're looking at a daycare center. What does a daycare center have to do with resiliency? Have we thought about, can they be a shelter? Does that save us money? Can they offer us a resource such as food distribution to our first responders? And if so, how can they be a partner? But we don't want to ask them after something has happened. Let's ask them before, let them be part of the solution now. So as you're going through all of these entities, as actions are happening in our community, start the conversations now. Build step 2, housing and property protection. When we have land acquisition, Blue Acres, I know, is a little bit of a give and take situation. Blue Acres, from its programmatic standpoint, makes perfect sense. It gets those severe repetitive loss properties out of the system, but they have to revert back to open space. When they revert back to open space, that takes away taxable. I understand that. You lose your rateable on that. But at the same time, if I look at pros and cons and I really work through a dichotomous key of does this property make sense to my community, the answer sometimes is not what is originally expected. So when I think about how I'm going to have home relocation, as variances are coming up at my planning board, am I looking at it just for what the property is, or am I looking at some other reasons why this property shouldn't be sold, should have a variance, shouldn't have a variance to it? Residential and business owner education and awareness. There are a few, not many, you probably know as well. There are some programs that residents and businesses can drive. Let them know about what the municipality is thinking about, because you'd be surprised how much you can partner together in making sure that when they're going after something, it's mutually beneficial to the municipality. Cultural and natural resources is another big one. We are now looking at some more creative ways to approach some resiliency. We've always gone to FEMA as a reactive. Now we're looking at NOAA. We're looking at the Nature Conservancy. We're looking at some of our environmental organizations that are looking at acquisition of land, that are doing living islands, that are trying to do some other activities. We have one community that has a very small spit of land. When the fetch comes across the bay there, it's gaining speed that like you can't imagine. When it is finally hitting up against $1 million homes, it's a problem. And now you have this spit just destroying, it's going away at about 12 inches every 2 years. That's gonna be gone soon, so what can we do? There are now experiments out there. NOAA is looking at how do I do some coastal barrier protection through live island vegetation. They're putting all sorts of activities. It's a grant we really never looked at, but all of a sudden now scientists are behind this and they want to go after it. So the municipality worked with the Nature Conservancy, they created a partnership and they submitted a grant for a living island opportunity. I don't know if they're going to get it yet. We don't know, but it's certainly the first time that we've looked a little outside of the box and tried to say, how can we create and take our natural resources and do something different with them? Emergency and health services, structure and infrastructure. How do we look at planning? All of these are questions that we should be asking ourselves. And again, we're going to give you these slides, so go through them and just maybe, if you're there, give it to your individual departments. Give it to if you're the police department. Make sure they understand how everything integrates together. And then you can begin the dialogue. Once you do that plan, so again, you're building your database. You're knowing what resources are out there. The next thing is you're looking at everything from a standpoint of what happens if I have resiliency, I have the next storm. If they happen, these are the resources now that you are prepared to go after. Most of them you probably are already familiar with. FEMA has the two big ones. FEMA has pre-disaster mitigation and flood mitigation assistance. Flood mitigation basically allows elevation of homes. Pre-disaster mitigation is infrastructure compliance, elevation of emergency generators, construction of pump stations, that sort of infrastructure improvement. They are still your two biggest programs. We just went through a round. I know we have some of our clients in the room. You're submitted. The way it works is you submit to the state has a vested interest, the state is now working with Triad or whatever consultant is on an application. Some of that data that we all talked about, we thought we had it all in place. They're still asking for more, which is wonderful, because the state of New Jersey can only send in 10 FMAs, 1 resiliency project, unlimited number of PDMs, so that's a good thing. They're going to go to the federal government by January 30th. Usually those awards come out in like May, which means you all, next round, opens up in June and usually gets submitted sometime in November. So you have time now to be thinking about this 5-phase process. Collecting your data, looking at your resources, and getting ready. Because on PDM, it's the one place that you can actually go after your pump stations, your infrastructure improvement. Just remember, it can't be maintenance oriented. That is the biggest question that always comes up is, I have this project, but if it's a maintenance issue, it cannot be funded. It has to be an engineering solution. And if you have that conversation now with your engineer, how do I solve this flooding problem? If the term engineering solution, we go through it with Mark all the time. Mark, is this a maintenance issue? Well, can it be an engineering solution? Of course it can be. That's where you have to have your engineers be creative as well. And Mark has been great with working on us with stuff in that sense, because things and responses can be engineering solutions. You also have repetitive floodplain and severe repetitive loss. This is where if you know and you understand your residents and your businesses, those are the grants that allow them to do flood proofing and elevating of property. Do they know that resource is there? Are they getting quotes for the cost of elevating a home? Is it something that the municipality wants to take on? I think it would be a much better idea for you to think about that now versus having a homeowner coming in and not having an answer for them. But those are two programs they can go after. The other things we are now looking at again is, we're looking at the National Wildlife Federation. They have just come out recently with a new mitigation study. That mitigation study is looking at how communities can get planning dollars to be thinking outside the box. For New Jersey, they are looking at us because we do have these coastal communities in this high-density state. So we are actually on their listservs, and there's going to be a webinar coming up. It's sometime in mid-February. Because they're not looking at Montana anymore or Iowa. They're looking at these highly vulnerable states that have wetlands, have riparian areas, and have these resources that are out there but are costing billions of dollars because of the high density infrastructure that is immediately placed next to these areas. And then we're looking at USDA and EDA. So you can see there are resources, but for all of them, you must have your data in place, your plan in place, have everybody on the same page and speaking about the same strategy. The last thing we have then is some of our track records, which I'm going to hand back to Mike. But I would just emphasize to you all, because I've been in the trenches working on this for about 15 years now. And when these storms happen, I feel the struggle that you all have, and that is not having the data in the right place, or having not collected it initially. Knowing and understanding what goes into a grant application isn't just a grant writer's job. We can tell you, but if we all are speaking the same language, it becomes hugely beneficial to all of us. Because when we come in and ask for something, and you know what we're asking for, you know if it exists, or you know to collect it for the next time. So I would ask that these partnerships that are created really are equally beneficial. Our job becomes easier because we can write a much stronger application. You'd be amazed. We are spinsters, and I do that all the time. But when you have actual data, and you don't have to, you can use historical versus projected. FEMA looks at it much stronger. We can always make strong cases, but the strongest case is having a document that says this happened, this was paid for, and this was the impact. Versus Tammy going to ESRI or some other data source and saying this could happen, might cost this. There's a much different value given to it by the funding entity on the factual data. Know your data, look at everything from the resource, everything from planning to when you're building green acres, to your residents, to your businesses. They're all your resources in your community. Every decision should be made with understanding that when the next storm hits, how does it impact me? And then most important, know that there are resources out there that you can go after to create your solutions. Thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of thoughts and some examples. You do that.
I'll do that.
It's too high tech for me. Just some examples of projects that we've worked on. In Wildwood, the second bullet down, the $1.5 million hazardous mitigation grant, that goes back several years. And you may be familiar with what Wildwood is doing right now on Rio Grande Avenue, and that is a complete reconstruction of Rio Grande Avenue, and elevating the road and adding pump stations. Our project for $1.5 million started out as a match with the city of $500,000, which was becoming a challenge for the city because of other obligations. So the long protracted story, but a good ending, is the county also saw this as an opportunity to leverage that $1.5 million and invest county funds to elevate the road, add a pump station. We had it designed for 2 pump stations, but could only afford 1, so the basin was going to hold the 2, but it was going to be an engineering challenge. The fact is, in these programs, with this initiative, any kind of flood resiliency mitigation efforts, you have to be thinking holistically, as Tammy just suggested, in terms of how you look at conditions and needs. But then when it comes down to defining projects, there just is not enough money in the federal funding pots to do it all. It just doesn't exist. And many of the officials in here, elected officials and public works directors, et cetera, know that that pie keeps shrinking, public dollar pie. The slices are smaller. So the only way we can get things done is to be resourceful, as Tammy's saying, and bring other funding to the table rather. The other project is a massive project in Wildwood where that was a resiliency project that generated $12 million in funds from the state. It's actually being boosted to 15, but you're looking at a $25 million project as the final design apparently is suggesting. So we're looking at other resources, including USDA. USDA provides funding in the form of low interest, 2.5%, long-term 40-year loans. But in that project, another element that's being a way to save dollars for the actual flood mitigation work is there's street reconstruction, Pacific Avenue, Taylor, and a third street that need water and sanitary sewer lines that were going to be a part of that project that are coming out of the flood project per se, that budget, and our USDA funding sources. So we're also, Tammy, going back for another phase with flood mitigation, pre-disaster mitigation funding. So it's really trying to piece all the different resources together to make the project work. And it's challenging, but it's the only way you're going to get things done because there just are not enough dollars. The point is there isn't enough to go around from one single source. And that's very evident just in those 2 projects alone. In North Wildwood, that was a $9.9 million. It was a real home run, we thought. But as it turns out, with permits and some issues with CAFRA and other agencies, the project has morphed into a much more expensive project. And right now, we're looking at some other resources to help make that project work. But that one serves the entertainment district and that surrounding area in the Anglesey section of town. We wrote that application, and I should say, many of these we have written. In some instances, we are implementing the grants. And not to toot our horn, but I know that Becky Jones has been very happy with the work that we're doing in really tracking the construction phases, the drawdowns, especially when there are combined resources come together. It's a mountain of oversight that's involved. But you got to do it or you're not going to get the funds, because a lot of those are reimbursements. So the municipality has to come up with the funds up front and then be reimbursed on the back end, and you won't be reimbursed unless the records are in order and there's the proper documentation, engineering, and other to support that. Just one other, just to show you just a couple of examples. We're close to $1 billion in grants, and they're all not flood mitigation, but a lot of them carry the experience of management of grants and figuring out ways to be resourceful. Stone Harbors is one we are managing, and that's a $2.2 million project, pump stations and sewer line extensions. And while Crest is here, and we've got an application in right now for $4 million, just around $4 million, 4 pump stations, a phase 1 project with storm sewer collection lines. Big project, and a huge impact area as well. So anyway, that's just a thumbnail of the projects that have been funded, but the approach is very, very important that you have to think holistically, you have to be prepared, have that data, because they're typically, and Tammy didn't say this, but the fact is, when the announcements come out of flood assistance, disaster assistance, being available, those NOPAs usually have a very short time frame by design. So only the towns that are ready are going to be able to respond. And if you're not prepared, don't have that base data, even with engineering available, it makes it very difficult to meet the deadlines and be thorough in the presentation, because this is a national competition. It gets filtered at the state level at OEM, but ultimately you're dealing with cities all over the country for those few dollars. I just would close with a couple comments. This coalition, I didn't know much about it, to be perfectly honest, heard of it, but I thought it was always good to go back and to read your mission statement. And I think, and not to sound gratuitous, Tom, but I think to all of you, your mission statement says it all. To build more resilient communities at the Jersey Shore by developing policies and practices that will anticipate future concerns and create solutions to be shared by all. We're here to offer some solutions and to be available to help and to be proactive, anticipating the next big one, which unfortunately I think is a reality these days. There is no such thing as a 500-year flood anymore. It's usually within 50 or less years that we're having this flood. So I think the message is to be prepared. Your mission statement is why you're here, and hopefully we can be available to assist in coming up with some creative solutions in that process. Frank, I don't know if you want to offer any comments.
Sure. Very familiar with the coalition. Tom and I actually went to high school together, and don't hold that against me, but his inspiration and his work here is well noted in the county. As you know, I'm a county freeholder, have been in Atlantic County for 10 years, a business owner and a property owner in Atlantic City. And certainly recently have started to do some consulting work with Salmon and with Mike here. So really, all the technical information has been presented, and it was an eye-opener to me when I started to look at some of the grant funding that was available and how many municipalities or entities didn't know what was available, what were the deadlines, what were the line item authorizations, how to actually apply for these things. And I just think it's a great team. I'm sure there's other grant writers out there, there's other people offering services, but the reputation, I think, and the experience here looks positive to be considered for an option and ask questions. I mean, there was a lot presented today, even for me to listen to. So you're the professionals here and the appointed and elected officials, the engineers, and you know specifically where the soft spots are in your community as far as flood hazards are concerned, or where there needs to be some resiliency or mitigation. So please, we have all our contacts on I think the handout we're giving out today that has our emails and our cell phone numbers. And feel free to just contact us if you have a question or if there's something specific you want to get working on. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any, or Mike or anyone else up here.
Okay, we're available for questions now. Tom, that's okay?
Sure. Any questions? Either now or afterwards. If you want to ask them now, that's fine. Mike and Frank are going to be here after the meeting if you want to go up. David?
Yeah, just one question on an aspect of your resiliency planning, and that has to do with shelters. I know there's an increasing need for animal shelters. You thought that wasn't the first thing we think of an approaching storm. You want to get people out of harm's way. We also know that a lot of people are so attached to their pets, if there's no room for their pets, they probably won't leave their structure and they're going to stay in harm's way. I was talking to a developer last month who was in Monmouth County, was affected by Sandy, and he was so concerned about what he witnessed, he went ahead and built 2 private animal shelters for people. His complaint is a lot of people don't know he's there. So I know in all the counties and with your hazard mitigation plans and your OEM people, you may know of local shelters that accept animals, but I think there's also a need to look beyond your borders and know there may be some shelters regionally out there that people should know about. And maybe you've done some of that with your work with other municipalities, but if not, I'd be glad to try and get that information, not just to you, but to the people here in the room.
Well, that's another resource, Dave, that needs to be factored into that holistic planning. I think Avalon has set up a resort, an animal shelter offshore on the mainland. I know Mayor Palugi was working on that after Sandy, but anticipating what followed Jonas, et cetera. So a good point. But again, that's another element of the resources. Sometimes they are capital resources. Sometimes they may, and the funding to do that project may come from a totally different source that has nothing to do with disaster assistance, but ties into the overall plan. So again, thinking holistically and preparing. Good thought. And it is a big deal because some people will not leave the island if they can't take their pets, and that creates added problems for police and emergency services. I'm sure you've experienced that, and I think that's what precipitated Mayor Palugi's efforts to try to encourage people to get off and know that their animals will be safe. Good point.
Anyone else?
Tammy, what's coming up next in terms of any programs, disaster assistance, or have we passed that cycle right now?
We passed the cycle for now.
So we passed the current cycle, which was, what was the deadline for that? And just a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And so the next cycle for disaster assistance will be in the fall?
Yeah, so the next major cycle is the FEMA cycle. And it traditionally opens in June with the state receiving applications in that November-ish time. It's usually right before Thanksgiving. And then there's like a 30-day period of give and take. And then they officially submit to the federal government by January 30th. That has been the cycle for about the last probably 5 or 6 years. So that's probably your next big one that you'd want to plan for.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few things, and luckily I have an incredible staff that reminds me because I'll always forget. Paul Dietrich, our MJPPI Systems Administrator, would like to have a meeting in February, March, and in May, correct? So that means when I send the invite out, if you are part of our MJPPI or want to be part of our MJPPI, we will have a meeting at 10 a.m. prior to the regular meeting, then we'll have our regular 11 a.m. meeting where we do our regular.
You'll put that on the announcement.
Yeah, I'll put that in.
And we're going to be going over not only the update for our basic information from
what we did in 2019, but we're also still trying to complete and finalize the insurance promotion study. So, hopefully everybody's gone back to their governing bodies and discussed some of the activities we talked about, that they're going to be good with doing the promotional activities. So be ready to jump back into those discussions so we can finalize both the flood promotion study and our 2019 update.
Jim?
We're at Margate next month, so for everybody get directions, let me know, we'll get them out on the website.
Okay, that's good. I know, Patricia?
I just want to ask a general question, since there seems to be a lot of concentration here, and recently after completing the master plan in Cape Bay, in particular attention to the FEMA higher standard guidelines for critical facilities. Are any of the municipalities moving in any direction to make a commitment to not build within 500-year floodplain?
Be nice, wait a second, be nice.
Critical facilities, and I know.
We have some animals here,
And I know
Councilwoman,
it's
we have some
different.
animals.
I know it's different for every municipality, I'm just throwing it out.
A lot of the towns are meeting the 500 year, for heights and things.
Yeah.
But nobody, all our communities on the, most of the communities are in the 500 year.
So you're dealing with the height standard? Okay, that's.
For critical.
And for emergency.
For critical facilities.
Yes, for criticals, okay, thank you. You're a great resource.
But
I know
also,
you're new, so.
along that line though,
Welcome to the neighborhood.
you should,
I'm in good health.
Be nice, be nice.
as you update your master plans though, it's not only just our municipal facilities that are critical, you should also be looking at, putting in your ordinances so that if the electric company or water company, or the MUA are building infrastructure, you should also try to put that in your ordinances that they need to build it to that elevation standard also. Hopefully they are, because hopefully their funding is requiring them to, but we should make sure that we encourage them in our master plans and our ordinances that's what their requirements should be also.
I should probably explain to some of the newcomers, even after 8 years. The coalition kind of functions like an enlightened kindergarten, where, the boys have all the, and the girls are over here and everything. So, some of the gals, like Chrissy and Kim, they, and Nita, it's like this. So, we're trying to be.
It's more like the Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, so it's it's a little, we get a little rough house. So, but the key is, I'm glad that you asked the question. The key is to ask the question because we want to get the right answer. And we do have a lot of professionals here. If we can't get the answer, we can find the answer. And one of the things that Neil Byrne from Seattle City has been a class 3 in the CRS program. And that's, an outstanding achievement. Now Avalon, as I understand, has gotten to be a 3 too. Also, 7 years ago, there were only like a handful of 5s, right?
Yeah.
Right, there was only a handful in the whole state. I think I did a survey a couple months ago. There were 22 or 23 municipalities in the state of New Jersey that were 5 or below, and only 1 3, the oldest of 3. 17 of the 5s are in the Coastal Coalition, and we share the information. Anybody that comes to our meetings will know anything that we have. Frank, from Avalon, Nanaloke, Neil, Paul, Bruce, Jimmy, Mike, Kim, whatever you need. No one hides anything. We're trying to get better together. Howard Marlowe, and thank God I remember his name, who's a lobbyist with the Warwick group, Dan Genofi, who came up with the concept of regionality. We have to work together. The same flooding concerns that are in Cape May are the same that are in Berkeley and in Neptune and in Woodbridge and Stone Harbor and every place else. Similar, 90%. So let's work together. And I'm crossing my fingers. I can't say for sure that we got it, but that planning and assistance that we asked the Army Corps for, we're getting closer to funding for that. So if we get that funding, we'll be able to get the planning assistance for the 13 communities that missed out on the HUD grant. So we don't have it yet, but we think we have a good opportunity to get it. So, cross your fingers on that. Paul?
One other thing. It seemed after the last month's meeting where they came down and the Army Corps talked about the Back Bay study.
JB.
And I went up and actually went to the Ocean County CRS meeting where they presented the Back Bay study to them. Fortunately for I was able to see their slide presentation. And I saw a kind of a common theme, and it seems like, and I just kind of like to poll the people here, how many people that are in here have actually read the Back Bay study to really look at what the impacts are to your communities and what strategies are being recommended? Does everybody really have a good grasp of that? And if not, this would be a good roundtable or a good forum that maybe we need to have a meeting dedicated to really talk about that. Because, I mean, I've read it probably 3 times to really truly understand what
I read sports, he reads open base studies.
To understand what they're promoting for not just my town, but in Cape May County in general, because there's a lot of common themes. And when you kind of heard JB talking, he kind of, if you read the study, which had like a lot of the different alternatives, he was kind of narrowing down and kind of giving us a preview of what they're going to be proposing as, I'll say, what their recommended solution is going to be coming up in the next couple of months. If the people in this room don't understand the implications and what those things are, our governing body members aren't going to be able to understand that. And some of when you look at, they have some of the renderings of what they're calling the flood wall, like along the Back Bay. You're talking about, Neil kind of brought this up. You're talking about massive public outcry. Those are good, those are going to be hard discussions to have, and if we can't explain that to our governing body members, and you really got to start having discussions with them now, so that they truly understand what those impacts are, because it really should. You got to start. I've changed my whole methodology of how I'm approaching flood protection in our Strathmere section, just based on seeing how they're heading in that direction. So, whether or not we want to dedicate some time to that to really understand it a little better. I know the Army Corps is here all the time, and and even if we ask them to come back down, just so that as we ask more questions, I know JB kind of gave a presentation, but just hearing some of the comments between this and Ocean County, it sounds like that maybe there's some communities that aren't prepared to have those discussions with their governing body members.
How about if I make a suggestion? Joel's going to get me JB's presentation, right?
Yeah, because that would be helpful, because you missed out on a lot of.
Here's what I'm suggesting. I'm going to get Mike's presentation electronically. I'll send out Mike's presentation electronically, and Joel will get me JB's. And let's shoot for March, as maybe we can get JB to come back and just do maybe a question and answer or something like that. That way we could spend 45 minutes. Because if I remember, Neil and Mike and maybe Paul had some specific questions. And the meeting, I'm just telling you, the meeting was going on. But we were trying to accomplish other things, but maybe we could have one meeting devoted just to questions and answers after you read the Back Bay study.
Yeah, I don't think JB's presentation was done justice by the
No.
forum we were in.
No.
Okay, and it just happened to be.
It was an update.
Yeah, but I mean, it was what it was. But I think the towns in southern New Jersey, Cape May County, Atlantic County, need to look at this report that they're starting to say that they're going to pursue and go look for billions of dollars for. Because if you read the report, every town south of the middle of Ocean City is going to have probably about a 5 or 6 foot wall along their Back Bay.
But see, that's not
That's one of the options.
Yeah.
But I think once you start looking at what's actually going to have to come down to for most of Cape May County, I mean, I'll say from 34th Street Northern is probably gonna, possibly be the floodgate, but everything south of Ocean City is gonna be elevation, because you couldn't build a flood wall. What town in Cape May County could build a flood wall up above probably elevation 12 to 13 along their back bay? Let alone the hypothetical nightmare of getting easements to construct it. Politically, no town is gonna allow a 12 to 13 foot high solid wall, let alone them also addressing the public access rules, which the state of New Jersey is so up on making everybody comply with. You couldn't get up and over that wall.
Okay, let me do this.
No, the costs work. Like all the proposals that they provided in there work as a cost benefit. So, could you build the wall? No. In Strathmere, no, it didn't meet the cost benefit because there's too much open space between Whale Beach, between Sea Isle and Strathmere to make it worthwhile. So, I'm looking at total elevation, But realistically, 90% of Cape May County is going to be an elevation project.
Let's do this. Let's get that out and tell each a representative in each municipality, please read it and please be prepared to speak about that at a future meeting. And I'll devote an entire meeting to just questions and answers, and we'll get JB's real good about coming down. And you guys can ask all your questions. Like, you're right, Neil, it wasn't the proper form. I thought it was just going to be a 15-minute update, this is what we're doing.
But even watching the Ocean County presentation where they had the benefit of that, there were still officials in that room that, they were asking questions about things that clearly they haven't read and understand what the plan is.
Okay.
And I'm just imploring everybody in this room, does it take time to read it? Is it boring at times? Yes, but it's as important as what the beach fills were that we all have now to protect the oceanfront. It's that next level of funding, and it's going to follow through that. Towns that aren't up with this and doing this could be left behind in the extent that the DEP is developing a funding mechanism because they have to cost share all of this along with the local shares, that the proactive towns are going to be on the forefront of getting that funding compared to, like Ocean City was the first town that got really the beach fills in Cape May and Atlantic County, and then they kind of, extended outward, but it's going to be the same case on the back bay.
Well, all we can do is ask people to read it, and all I can do is put a meeting together just to address that issue. You can't make them read it, and you can't make the people pass it up the line. The Army Corps is very good. Whenever I ask the Army Corps for anything, I mean, the Army Corps is the greatest. So if we can all agree to that, maybe we'll shoot for maybe a March meeting, and do it that way. That way, I can probably get it out probably within a week to get to the film. Yeah. So then I'll send it out. I'll send out Mike's presentation. And then people will have time to review it, and I'll say, look, we're going to have this meeting in March. It's the first week in March. Be prepared to discuss this because the Army Corps is going to come down, and you'll have a back and forth on this.
And what I'll also say, can you just include the link to the back bay study?
Yeah.
So that way, that way, if somebody doesn't have a copy, doesn't know where to find it,
we
can give them an updated,
Yeah.
Your presentation plus the actual study itself.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That way everybody will get it.
In addition to that, I think when you put forward this request with JB and the Corps to have them come out again, you should have some of the technical engineers on the study come as well. They're H&H person, they're civil and structural team members.
Well, we'll make it a little bit longer. I try to keep the meetings an hour, 15 minutes, an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. We'll just dedicate that meeting to a longer meeting, and people will have to understand if you have to walk out, you have to walk out. But it's important. It's an important meeting. If you want to if we don't tell the Army Corps what we think, that's our fault. That's not the Corps' fault. They're having sessions all over the place, but in order for them to move forward, they need to get the vital data. The reason why anyone talks to us is because we're the ground we're the ground roots guys. We got the $85,000 grant from FEMA to develop the web app because we think we can develop things that other people can't. There's a zillion web apps out there. No one's gonna have a web app like ours. The reason why is because we're gonna have a grassroots one, something that's gonna be down to the street level. So that's what the Army Corps wants, that's what FEMA wants, that's what we can provide, but we have to do our part. So if it's all right with everybody, I'll get the info from the Corps, I'll send it out hopefully in the next week or 10 days, and we'll shoot for March, Paul. That way, March is North Wallet? North Wallet?
Is it North Wallen?
Where is it, Francis?
Yeah, it's North Wallen.
It's in North Wallen, but you also have the MJPPP meeting before.
You're always gonna have to, we're gonna have that, I mean, that's always gonna be the case.
I was gonna say, the Army Corps' tentatively selected plan, what they are proposing from all of those alternatives, is going to be released later this month. So at that point, we'll all be able to look at exactly what they're proposing. Not that you shouldn't read the Back Bay Study entire document, but maybe we want to try to schedule in coordination with that.
Which March would be?
March would be good, or maybe even February.
We can do February, Jim.
Do that. We're gonna do it like 9:30, earlier meeting, 9 o'clock.
No, because we have the PPI.
Do you need a whole hour for the PPI too? Can you wrap that up
Probably
in
not.
a half hour?
Yeah, probably do that.
So say 10:30 instead of 11?
So do the PPI at 10, start our regular meeting with the Corps at 10:30, and figure it's gonna be an hour and a half or so?
Yeah, that works. I think.
Well, let's see if it works.
I can't guarantee Jay's schedule.
No,
Yeah.
well, shoot for it.
Yeah, but we can still have discussions.
Absolutely.
We can still have our discussions here so that we can try to educate ourselves among ourselves.
And somebody
Kind of
can
have a
put
thought.
Yeah.
So even if JB and, that stuff, we can still kind of formulate our ideas. Maybe bounce them off.
John? Hold on, John?
Yeah, is it worthwhile having a, like a comment letter to the Corps from the coalition?
We can do that.
You can't do that until after the meeting. That would take a while to do.
That's why I think maybe having the meeting sooner than later to give you time to process what you learned and
Well,
formally respond.
let's shoot for what we just said. I'll try to get in touch with JB today, no later than tomorrow, to see if he can make the meeting, and if not, perhaps the Corps can send somebody else, and we'll do it. Is everybody okay with that? All right, so let me give you a brief update on some of the other things, so we can wrap things up. We're getting started once again with the webcam project, so I'll be contacting someone from each municipality. I have 3 municipalities so far that have indicated that they've raised money privately. If you remember, the webcams are going to be connected to our website, and eventually they're going to be connected to our web app. And we're trying to create a public-private partnership. The price tag is $7,500. I'm not looking for any city money. I'm looking for private individuals within the town to donate the money. So far, I have 3 municipalities that have assured me that they have the money. So the idea is that they'll get, what will the private entities get? They'll get the advertising, their name will be on the camera, so every time the people click on it, it'll say the XYZ Realty Company, or the ABC Construction Company, or so-and-so attorneys. They'll get the press conference when we do the press conference. And, once we get it hooked up to the web app, they're gonna get millions of hits. So $7,500 is a small price to pay. The idea is to get these web cameras in every town in the coalition. And once it's all hooked up, people will be able to see on the website any one of the cameras. And then once we get the web app, anybody that has the web app for their town will be able to see what's going on in their town through the camera, through the web app. So the web app's a big deal. We're going to continue with the grants. One of the things that we have to do is create private-public partnerships. What I've found out is that there's folks out there that will donate money for good causes if we ask politely. So that's what we're going to do. And Shore Grants has been working with us on that. And as the money comes in, I'll talk to you about, little things here and little things here. Is it gonna be all kinds of, $50,000, things like that? No, but will it be 1,000 here, 1,200 there, 1,500 there, 2,000 there, for something maybe you couldn't fit into your budget? Okay, I want a drone, I'm sorry, we don't have money for a drone. Okay, well, maybe I can find money for a drone. Or we need some emergency generators. Well, we're not raising the tax rate 1 penny, so you get your generators this year. Okay, well, maybe we can work this out. And I'm sure if I talk to almost every OEM or to every municipality, there's someone in Public Works that has a nice to have, they'd like to have this, or they'd like to have that. So we want to have our first responders and our OEMs and our Public Works people to have all the equipment that they need. I can go on and on about emergency power and water. We're never going to have enough emergency power the next time the storm hits, and we're never going to have enough water. So these are some of the things that we're working on. So everybody saw that I put out the list for the entire year of where our meeting's going to be. Hopefully, if Andrew, we're going to find out if our thing was correct about the televising meeting. If that's the case, we'll start to do that. I want to mention that the folks from Forerunner are here today, and they made a presentation a couple of meetings back. So if you want to talk to them about their project and what they offer, you should talk to those folks before you leave. If you have any questions for anybody, Mike's going to be here, Frank's going to be here, Mike's whole team's going to be here. Ask those questions that are necessary. So I think last year was the year of accountability. I think we were accountable, we raised money, we got a lot of things done. Our PPI is working good. Tidal flooding talk's doing good. I'm going to be talking to you about the things we're going to be doing with the Press Atlantic City for outreach. They're going to be a vital partner of ours. South Jersey Gas is going to help us with a few things, another one of our stakeholders. We're going to be getting our PSAs out this year, our public service announcements. They've already been recorded by Dan Skeldon and Paul McCarty. You'll be able to use them, Paul, for whatever you can use for outreach if you can use them. Palma, on every one of our tidal flooding talks, we've exceeded 1 million reaches in less than 2 years. So people are watching tidal flooding talk. So that's another way to get our message out. The PSAs, we're going to ask every radio station that we can get our hands on. So if anybody knows anybody at a radio station, PSAs, they don't have to run a public service announcement, but if we ask them nicely, it's very helpful. So, does anyone have any questions about anything that we just spoke about? Okay, well, if there's no questions, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'll see everybody in Margate next week.